Joanne, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? How's it
Good.
going, Annick?
Very good. I'm glad that you could join me today so we can actually sit down and have a little bit of a chat.
Happy to do so.
And I know that both of us need to kind of keep it in check because you and I can talk for hours. So to be able to condense a 3 hour conversation down to 30 minutes, this might be kind of interesting.
Sure. I think we could just focus in on a couple of topics and have some highlights. I think we can do it.
All right. Joanne, one of the reasons why I wanted you to be on here is that out of all the people that I know in like this whole series that I've been wanting to do is to highlight people who have decided to live maybe in a different way or quote unquote it's not the norm and to kind of highlight where you've come from, what that is and what it's like. So you came to mind because you kind of live a different lifestyle than most people in some
I
ways,
do.
right?
Yes. Yeah, in some ways, I think I've made some different choices along the way. I think from the various peer groups that I've had along the journey that I've been on, and I've started to, experiment, like to say, well, what can I do differently, and how can I live differently? And in other ways, I'm just very, I find myself at times very normal. I have a very, in some ways, I have a very traditional lifestyle when you look at it from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And in other ways, I've made some choices to live a life that's less ordinary. So,
Well, then let's dive in. So, first off, you're actually an immigrant.
hmm yeah, so I think that's like really starts off this ability or this idea that you can do things differently. When you have to overcome the challenges of immigration and being an immigrant as a child, I think that you start seeing things from a different perspective. I think, first of all, you have a greater appreciation for all the opportunities that we have here in the US, and that many people not only take for granted, but just dismiss outright and don't take any advantages about this on these opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So, having come from a different culture that really at the time didn't have a lot of opportunities, it didn't matter how hard you worked. There was only, there's only so much. There was a lot of political unrest. There wasn't sort of freedom of expression. It was very uniform in terms of society. As society, like the
Mm-hmm.
Polish people have very very uniform culturally. So moving to the U.S., first of all you see diversity, you see all the abundance, and you see in my view unlimited opportunity. So
How old were you when you moved here?
I was 13, so it's like right in the midst of
Oh,
this period of developing your, like
yeah.
entering adulthood, really, entering adolescence and adulthood. And in some ways, like you have no choice but to grow up faster. You have a lot more sort of on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get you don't get a lot of the advantages that sort of kids with my age or my peer group at the time would have, that they grew up. I moved to a small town. So these were people who kind of grew up there. They all knew each other. They've all gone to elementary school together, middle school. And there wasn't a lot of, at the time, there wasn't a lot of outsiders coming into that small community. That since
Mm.
has changed for that community. But at the time, I was one of the few people who did not speak English. And by few, I mean me, my brother, and my sister in the school. So
So when you first came here, you didn't speak any English.
no, I mean, I took like, my parents signed me up for like a year of Saturday afternoon classes. And if you've ever taken foreign language classes yourself, you're like, oh, let's take Spanish in, fifth grade and see how it goes in moving to a different country. So that was my level of English proficiency when I moved. And actually the very first school district I went to, I was in an English as a second language program, which just means that you spend majority of your day learning English. Like that's really the obstacle
Okay.
that you have in front of you. And I think that in some ways, it also taught me this idea that whatever that obstacle is, you need to focus on that. Like
Mm.
conquer that one thing
Yeah.
because you can't do anything else. You cannot accomplish anything without speaking the language. So you have to focus on that one obstacle. And so that's an important lesson. I think not enough people take that lesson. They see an obstacle, they continue to kind of do other stuff. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, this is the one thing you need to conquer. And I've taken that focus to many other, I guess, parts of my life throughout the last 25 years.
I also want to say, okay, so you come here at 13, you
hmm
conquer English, and
hmm
then within 5 years, you end up going to MIT.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually so. So in the first year, I conquered English. So I went from eighth grade in remedial reading class and ESL to going to an honors English class by ninth grade.
Wow.
So I really did focus on learning English and, put my mind to it. And I didn't practice speaking it. So English written and reading and writing English is by far easier when you're learning than speaking. And so I did that. So by ninth grade, I was in regular curriculum, and actually, like, I was number one in my class. And so I graduated salutatorian from high school, and I applied again. I conquered English in a single year. That was like the focus, and then I moved on to sort of conquering the education system, I suppose, in the U.S. The challenge, the next challenge was up ahead of me.
Right.
Was just figuring out how, like, okay, what do I do next? And a lot of it was just focusing on education. Because again, when you're an immigrant, and I think that someone referenced this study recently, if you come from economically disadvantaged minority or woman, education will be the thing that will set you apart. If you're a white male coming from a privileged family, it doesn't really matter where you go to school and how well you do. You're already kind of set for life. So for those people that say, well, education doesn't really matter, it depends what your starting point is. And so for me, I knew that was a really important part, and it was a way for me to distinguish myself from being just an immigrant to being a very valuable immigrant.
I can say that I also come from a similar background in that as well, with my parents being immigrants. They saw early on that education would be the way for us to get ahead in life, and made sure that that also was something that was offered to me and my siblings, which I have to say it has, I want to be where I am without that. So I totally agree with you on that. So you go to MIT. Where did you decide to study while you were there?
So I got to MIT by way of focusing on math and computer science. And this was early 90s. So whatever the computer science was just starting out. There was no World Wide Web. I actually saw the birth of World Wide Web while I was in college. And so I excelled at math, and I was pretty good at computer science, but it's not what I wanted to do. So in my rebellious self, I switched from the hard sciences to what's considered the softest sciences and life sciences. So I did biology and neuroscience at MIT, because I thought these were interesting subjects I didn't know enough about, and I wanted to deepen my knowledge in that area. And so I pursued those two majors while I was there.
That's pretty wild, because it is definitely a departure. But I think I'm making a point of asking about this because it really does inform what happens later. But there is one thing that I would love for you to talk about, because during these years you went to a camp that I think is really kind of in some ways really defines who you are. And it's interesting that you had that back when you were 18. I think that's when you went, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
where did you go?
So I went to college, and one of the things is when you come into a different culture, and even just like growing up growing up in that like shadow of otherness, I think I realized that connecting with people was going to be a challenge for me. So obviously focusing on education, focusing on learning, those things came easily. These were all contained within me, and I was able to control those. When it comes to interacting with other people, there was a very, very sort of gray area for me, or an area of very low competence, let's say. This is my nice way of talking about myself. Like, I was an awkward person and a nerd. And so...
And a bit of a punk.
And so this idea of connecting with people and relating to people, I just really didn't know how to go about it. So I went in my freshman year, or maybe the beginning of my sophomore year. I'm not quite remember, but I remember the specific sequence of events. I went to the Harvard bookstore in Harvard Square, and I went to the self-help section, and I just started scanning the titles that would appeal to me. I probably picked up 10 books, the various sort of psychology books. This was obviously an educational minded place. And one of the books that I picked up was called Radical Honesty. And I read that book, and the message in it very much appealed to me. The message basically is that to have effective connections with people, you have to really, not that you have to bare your soul every time, but you need to get honest with people. You cannot have a level of intimacy without being honest about who you are, who you present yourself as, what are you capable of, what are you willing to do, and just really connecting with people in expressing to them how they make you feel, and to do that without interpreting what it is that they're doing or what they're saying. You just really have to reflect back and say, this was the fact, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel. So you get a sense of ownership. You really start seeing people in a different way. And as part of that experience, having read that book, again, remember, this is the 90s. There was no internet. It wasn't like, go to our website, sign up for a newsletter. There was literally like a card that you tear out of the book. If you want more information.
Mail it
so
in.
I sent this, yes, I filled out my card, and I wrote some note about like how this book really like changed my perspective. And I got a note back. And I think there was a newsletter. So I got signed up to a physical newsletter, throwback. And in the very first newsletter that I got from the Radical Honesty community was a retreat. And it was in Mexico. It was like $900. And I was like, I'm going to go. This was like smack in the middle of the semester, or the sort of beginning of the semester. I took a week out of my life, and I met a bunch of strangers who were at the very least 20 years older than myself and older. That was like the smallest gap.
Right.
And I got to experience life as it is about to happen to people who are older and are reflecting back on their life. And they're trying to solve the problems that life has brought upon them, and really that we brought upon ourselves. And I really got a sense of what life can be when you're not authentic, when you're not yourself, when you're always presenting, like wearing a mask, or you're trying to please people. And it just really gave me a lot of perspective on working on living my life in an authentic way, and really questioning what it is that what is it I'm putting into the world?
Right.
And how do you relate to others? Again, this was what I was trying to solve and educate myself on, is how to be effective in relating to other human beings, which I think is a lifelong lesson that we're all learning. And but it's one of the most important things, because it's really, at the end of the day, that's what I believe we're here for, is for connection.
Yeah.
And you can't be very good at connection if you're faking it all the time. So because you're not connecting, you're never going to be able to keep it up. Whatever you present, you cannot keep that up for a long period of time. Your relationships will fail, your friendships will fail, everything suffers. And at the end, you suffer because you can't be who you truly are in front of other people. And I think that can be very devastating. What was interesting at that time is that people just started telling me things about themselves or about their relationships, because I was like the radical honesty chick, right? And they were like, since you're into radical honesty, like I have things that I need to tell someone, or this is what's going on. Like, can you like it became, in some ways, like, because I became more open to listen to people. And I've always had that quality. People do open up to me because I don't judge.
Yeah.
I don't judge people. And that's part of this radical honesty perspective as well. I'm not judging you. I take that interpretation. You have to train yourself to take interpretation off the table and just listen. So yes, that's my sort of the setting of the relationship part of my life. That's kind of where it started with Radical Honesty Camp.
It's fascinating, and it's interesting that something that happened, let's just say 20 years ago, now you are the age of those other people that were there, and you're having a very different experience than they were having at that age.
Yeah. I mean, what you find is I'm in the mid-age, and everything's true. We're all stereotypes.
Right.
And this is the time where people kind of start looking back and reflecting, whether it's with regrets for things they've done or the things they have not done, mostly things they have not done. And when you're looking at the other half of your life, and you're looking for all the milestones, and it's not maybe every single milestone, but the major milestones of life are behind you. And I think that's where those are the earliest, 40s, 50s, 60s people where they are talking about the relationships, the suffering that they were experiencing because of those relationships, the things that they were doing or not doing. And I think that it's a lot of effort to repair things, to repair relationships, to reconcile. If you can experience that pain that's more immediate sooner rather than putting it off, I think that that's something that's very important that people don't do. We don't address things that are important now. We just let them fester. And when you let them fester, you're the 50-year-old man crying in front of a group because of something you did or didn't do.
Right.
And it's like, sometimes it's too late, sometimes it's not. But that effort to reconcile is actually, it's quite enormous. So I try to live my life so that I can address those things sooner instead of sort of going 20 years back and trying to reconcile people, or just letting things go. Sometimes you're like, you can just, you can view things through a different lens, the relationships in your life, and value them. It's kind of, you can commemorate your relationships as well. You can thank them for the service they had in your life and let them go.
Well, so. I'm a true believer in the letting go. And also, I think that one of the things that I found, and we've discussed a little bit off camera, is people's willing or non-willingness to actually feel pain. The avoidance of pain. Yeah. So by avoiding, you think that you're not actually feeling the pain, but actually you're not allowing yourself to go through the process of getting angry or feeling it and then being able to come through on the other side. So I think that's also, yeah.
That's very true. That's very true. I think more and more we are avoiding. We're not just we're choosing not to. We're doing everything we can to avoid discomfort. And I mean, it's coming up in every single one of our, social media and everything. Yes. And then when we hide, and not only that, but we when we do experience discomfort, we don't want anybody to know. Like it's like a black mark. You're like, I got uncomfortable, or I am uncomfortable. Yeah. And the thing is that whether we're in discomfort, maybe not discomfort, but we're kind of neutral most of the time. These highlights that we experience, that we post about.
Right.
They don't come very often.
No. Yeah.
It's like 59 minutes of boredom, discomfort, neurosis, anxiety, and 1 minute of oh, look, this was perfect. Let me share that with the world. Let me share the 1 minute out of the hour where everything just lined up like so. And that's the story I want to tell people, because we don't want that discomfort.
So in relation to that, do you find, what's often thrown around right now, it's a really popular buzzword, is authenticity, which honestly makes my skin crawl. But I don't want to inform what you're going to say about it.
It's right up there with personal branding. I mean, it's really your personal brand. Like the minute you say brand, that to me, it's what you want people to think about you, not who you are, right? So it's the same thing like being authentic. What does that mean? Presenting yourself, when you're at ease. That's, I think, to me, being authentic is being at ease. And it's not how it's talked about. I think authenticity is, people talk about being raw or something. And, saying like it is, or, whatever it is, saying what comes to your mind. And, but what price or what cost? So for me, this authenticity or anything is, when are you at ease? Are you at ease with whatever you're doing, with whoever you're with, and can you be? And when you find yourself you have to put on a front, you have to be, you have to project an image, and you have to protect that image with the people you're with, then that's the inauthentic. Then you're always on guard. And actually that has a huge physiological impact on your body.
Right.
That I don't think we're paying enough attention to, the fact that we're inauthentic and we are hiding and we are suffering all the time. So yeah, I didn't know if there was more to that question, but I kind of went.
No, and I actually like where you went with this, because I think that it's a huge thing. You and I have both done a lot of video. That's actually how we met.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to tell the story quickly because I think it's kind of cool. This is what's great about the internet. So I have an old client through design who they're a couple that lives in Chicago, And the woman said to me, I have a friend, I just at the time had gone on Periscope, which is now pretty much dead, although I think it somewhat exists. But whatever. So I was doing these videos on Periscope. She's like, oh, I've got this friend Joanne who's doing these videos on Periscope. And I started to check you out. And I guess Tess said the same thing to you?
Yeah.
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 And from there, we started watching each other's videos. And then we started chatting. And then chatting weekly via Skype. And then we became good friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, that is the magic. Well, it's a magic of two things. We're both doing something new, right? Like you're doing something and you're telling other people you're doing it so that they can make that connection for you. Because it was like, I live in Chicago and I knew Tess. I met Tess through the Chicago Moms in Business, of which I found out through some other person, right? You have to keep putting yourself into uncomfortable situations, right? I used to go, and I still do that. I actually do that frequently. I go amongst strangers. I don't like sit back and go, well, I've got my circle of friends and I've got this job or I got this and I'm all set. I'm comfortable. I'm content.
Right.
I'm a person who often will run away from contentment. So I'll say, well, what is that? Like, what is it that I can do that's a little bit, challenging, that's a little bit uncomfortable? Because I think that's where the growth comes from. Not only that, that's where connecting with other people, like-minded people, can only happen. So if you're in a place that you're like, I don't know, I'm not quite feeling it, like get past that discomfort and put yourself among strangers. And I'm an introvert, so it's like no excuse. I'm like, if you're an introvert and you're like, oh, I feel really anxious about social situations with strangers, I'm like, let me give you some tips. Show up early, talk to the host, check out the venue, and then be the host of the people who are arriving. Greet people. Like, that's what I do, by the way. Like, I'm sure like half the events I go to, people are like, are you hosting this? I'm like, oh no, I'm just being friendly because I got here first.
I know where the appetizers are.
Yes, I will tell you like where it works, who the waiter is, where the restrooms are, where the name tags are. And I will feel in that space, but I have to arrive early, right? I have to be there. When I arrive and the room's already full, I totally get it. That is not a comfortable situation for an introverted person. It's not, you can't overcome it. You kind of, what I do, and I go, well, I'm not the most uncomfortable person in this room, so let me find that person who's less comfortable with me and talk to them. Two birds with one stone. You ease somebody else's pain of being there, and then you're also have someone to chat with. And and then once you're talking to one person, it actually becomes so much easier to talk to other people. So
I love that tactic. I think it's awesome.
Yes. It's developed over time.
Yeah. Well, first off, even deciding to make yourself uncomfortable, most people can't even get to that point. The fear just overcomes.
Yeah.
So, but once you get the ball rolling with action, things tend to play out in a way that makes it easier.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back just 1 second to the video thing and about authenticity and ease.
Yes.
One of the things that you and I have discussed, because the reason why we started talking about video in the first place was to talk about the shared experience of this new platform of Periscope. And also give each other what works and isn't working for you, whether it was through the algorithms or just being online and being in video.
Yes.
And I'd like to get your thoughts of what you think about video as communication to building a community.
Yeah, I think, and it's been a while, so it's so interesting. One of the things is I decided one day I was going to do live video without having any social media presence whatsoever. Yeah. I basically fast forwarded to whatever the most recent trend or recent tool is. And I challenged myself. I knew nothing. I didn't do video. I had no video production, nothing like that. And I just decided to start speaking live. And I did that through practice, right? I did a video every day, every single day at 10 a.m. So I kind of set a guideline for myself that I couldn't opt out of, right? Yeah. Every day at 10 a.m. I would do a live video. And so it wasn't like, well, I'll do a live video every once in a while, right? No, I went all in. And, I think video is our natural state of communication. It is as close as we get to sort of the tribal connection where you see the person, you don't just hear their voice, but you see their facial expressions. You kind of get a sense of what they're about, their environment, everything, all the choices that we've made, you get to see, right? We invite people into our homes and into our lives through video, especially live video, because everything else can be produced and edited and put in a studio and everything. A live video has a certain sense of vulnerability. We
Yes.
talk about authenticity. You can't be any more authentic than live video where people can engage with you and they can ask you questions and they throw you off. What does it
Mm-hmm.
look like when you go, ugh, that was a weird question, block, right?
Yeah.
And they get to see you under like a different kind of pressure, different kind of light. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't fake it on live video. So I'm a big fan of video, and actually how I've maintained my long distance friendships is
Good.
effectively I've used video, and I much prefer it to any other means of communication, like outside of texting, which is asynchronous and it's
Mm-hmm.
a way to keep in touch. But to really connect with someone that I care about, I have to do video. It is quintessential because the other thing it does is I can't be doing anything else when I'm on video with you,
Right.
right? Like I need to pay
Yes.
attention to you,
Yeah.
which is a very important part. Like that's a lost art.
Oh, yes.
Paying attention to the subject. Whether the subject
Yeah.
is the person in front of you or a movie or an experience, we are losing that art of
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to the subject without the distractions of our modern life, right? That's
Yeah.
true. And it's like, you have all of these people with like they're like letting go of the tools. They're like, it's too much, so I have to unplug completely. And you're like, no, it's a balance. Like it's the ability to decide, now I will pay attention to you
Mm-hmm.
and you are important. So I think video communicates a lot of that, especially live video.
Yes.
And as you're doing the video series,
Yeah.
I feel like we've come full circle from storytelling, like how we shared knowledge in
Right.
the olden days. And by olden days, I mean like 100, 200 years ago, some today even.
Yeah.
We share our knowledge by storytelling. Several hundred years ago, there was the inventing of the press after paintings and drawings and stuff. But with the invention of the press, printing press, we were able to record our knowledge. Then all of the advances that came after that, we've come full circle to storytelling, like through our words, through our
Yes.
images. This is our native state of communicating, and I think this is the far the best way of communicating with each other.
I, mic drop. Because it's true. I mean, I've had the similar experience as you have, and I know
Mm-hmm.
that you and I would not have the friendship that we currently have without having communicated via video. You just would have been somebody that I talked to a little bit. I know we're socially friendly, but we wouldn't have the depth of friendship we now have.
I don't think, without video there would be no connection at all.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there would be. It's the ability to see into the person of who they are, because we express so much more than our knowledge through video, right?
Yes.
This again,
Yeah.
this is the
Yeah.
authentic self. The tone of words, the choices of words,
Mm-hmm.
and again, it's those times when you're unprepared,
Yeah.
and what comes out is really what tells the other person who you are. And then we can say, is this my person?
Right.
Is this my people or not?
And do you also think, like in parlay to that, that you had done the 10 o'clock every day for,
Hmm.
was it 300 days? You did it for well over a year.
Yeah, I did it like 456 days in a row.
You're like 456.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
7, not 5.
You
But through that time, you also, with practice, I mean, because video definitely takes practice.
Video does, yes.
And
Talking to the screen takes practice.
yeah. And even with saying that, like the way that you deal with certain situations, that also, I would say, even just like life takes practice.
Yes, yes. Everything takes practice. The more you do it, the better you get. And that's
Yeah.
why, whenever someone wants to have an identity, own an identity, like
Mm-hmm.
the advice that you have to give them is you need to start doing whatever it is you want to be.
Yeah.
Right? That's why in every writing group, they'll say, if you're a writer, that means you're writing every single day. Like
Yeah.
you have to be doing the thing you claim to want to do. Right? Oh, I want to be a singer. Do you
Yeah.
sing every day? I
Right.
want to be, a music producer. Do you produce music every day? I want to be an accountant. Do you do spreadsheets every day? Right? Like whatever
Yeah.
it is that your heart desires, whatever identity you want to embody, you need to practice that craft. And so the practice is essential. I mean, my first, in some ways I'm a little sad because the Periscope The Periscope formula was to erase your videos after 24 hours, and I didn't get to catch until maybe month 3.
Yeah.
So I'm in some ways like sad that my first like 3 months of crap videos are gone, because my very first, I still remember, like I just went live. There was no title. I didn't know how to operate Periscope, like, flip the camera. Like the first month, I probably wasn't flipping the camera right. I didn't know you could flip it ahead of going live.
Yeah.
I was always like flipping it after I went live. Didn't know you could put titles in. Didn't know. I mean,
the shot of like the nostrils, like the weird angles.
They're like my crazy like YouTube videos that are out there that have all like the the weird face. Not only that, but because I was so committed to doing videos, I had to integrate into my life. So I didn't have time to prep. I didn't look great. I was usually like half the time I'm wearing a winter hat, winter in Chicago. And I just committed to so much to do it under any circumstance that I just got comfortable looking weird, looking funny, sounding funny. And because that's usually the people's fears. Like, why don't people do what they want to do? Because they're afraid of looking foolish. Mm-hmm. If you look foolish 50 times, you're like, if that happens at some point in the future, I already got this. Yeah. Like, I already embarrassed myself so much in so many different ways that I'm good. Like, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not anticipating. All fear is anticipating discomfort in the future.
Yes.
And when you anticipate the discomfort, what we think we're going to feel is way higher than what we actually experience, especially the duration. The duration of discomfort is much shorter than what we anticipate, and that prevents us from taking action. What's the downside? Mm-hmm. There really isn't any. And I've used the downside psychology since I was very, very, very young, actually, because there were so many things I had to overcome, so many obstacles, that I would just say, like, what's the downside? What's the worst that can happen? I mean, obviously, I always arrived at the same place. I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm not going to die. This is not going to kill me. So I was like, I'm just going to try it. But emotional pain and physical pain, all the pain that we anticipate, that can be very devastating. But yeah, the practice of it, I think, is you cannot undervalue practicing whatever the craft is. And anyone who's at all good or great at what they do, you don't ever catch them practicing.
Right.
Like, they are practicing.
It's the highlight reel. Like, it's the other part of the highlight reel.
And we see the outcome. Like, what we see is the outcome of their practice, not the practice. Because nobody, like, at some point you'll be like, oh, that's kind of boring. Like, it's not glamorous. Like, practice is not glamorous. No matter how the glamorous the effect is, that's all we consume. We consume the outcome, but we're less. More so today, because people are much more transparent. We have live cams. People are looking into each other's lives. We have reality TV. So we started to experience a little bit more of the practice portion of life, but not as much in the day-to-day.
Right. And whether or not people are even willing to go there, because as you were mentioning before, does the practicing align with your brand? Your clinical brand? Like,
you're effortless. Like, I just woke up like this, like, if you just rolled out of bed like this, like, well, you shouldn't have to practice if you're that talented, right?
Right.
Talent can really, in some ways, talent can really hurt you, because you think like, oh, I should just, I'm owed some level of success. I'm owed other people's attention to bring a little Gary Vee into play. What's your, we're dealing in attention. Attention is the currency. What is it that you're providing that warrants attention? And a lot of people are like, well, I rolled out of bed like this, so I'm fabulous. And you're like, no, that's a slog. Everything, like, attention getting is a slog. Attention getting is understanding what other people want. What do they need? Right. And are you providing it at a high enough quality that everybody else can't just wake up one day and be like, I woke up like this, pay attention to me. So,
well, that's actually a good parlay into what you're currently involved in, because you would think, from everything that we've been talking about, that I would make the assumption as a listener or viewer of this podcast, that you are a psychologist after your background. But that actually is not what you're involved in.
No, I've taken, it's interesting. I after undergrad, I went to graduate school for neuroscience, but I did, it's funny that you say it, because I considered psychiatry as a path. And I realized a couple of things. One is I'm a problem solver, and psychiatry, first of all, psychiatry deals with mental illness. So it's not actually solving problems, it's alleviating psychic suffering from people who have brain disorders. So I was like, okay, that's not really that interesting. And then psychology is, the craft of helping people suffer through like their emotional disorders, whether inborn or acquired. And it requires a lot of patience. And I was like, no, I just want to solve people's problems. So I realized that I'd be a crappy psychiatrist or psychologist because I'd be like, okay, I've heard your story. I gave you a solution. You did nothing about it. So very, very poor. So I was like, okay, what I really want to do is understand how the brain works. I'm going to go into neuroscience. And it's really because I didn't have any other options presented to me. Not knowing what your other options are is one of the most challenging things of early adulthood, and also being an immigrant, because you don't have that network of people that can kind of sprinkle fairy dust of knowledge into like, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this? No one, like there was no one like that in my life. I didn't even know to ask.
Right.
So I went into neuroscience. I got a PhD in neuroscience, but halfway through, I realized I didn't want to be a scientist because I looked ahead and I was like, how do these scientists live? Like, what's it like in your 40s, 30s, and 40s? You work hard, you're broke, you're competing for the same 10 positions with maybe 100 other people who may be far more into it than you are. And so I was like, I got to find something else for me to do that uses my other talents. So speaking of psychology, I took my love of counseling and psychology on understanding people and relating to people, my analytical skill, like going back to the math, I took everything that I picked up along the way and my credentials, and I took some business classes, so I learned a new skill, and then I became a management consultant. And by became is I got I interviewed and got an offer at the number one company that every business graduate wanted to work at the time. I remember cutting this out of like Fortune magazine, and I had the top 5 companies that MBAs want to work for. And McKinsey and Company was number 1. And that's where I went. Because if you're going to do it, like you got to do all out. But I practiced. Like that's the other thing. You're like, oh, that must have been nice. I'm like, no. I went out of my way to find the 2 other people who also wanted to be management consultants. And we practiced our cases. I went to business schools, classes 3 times a week in between my lab work. For 2 years, right? There was no accident. This wasn't like this is how I woke up and I got a job. And I think sometimes we don't tell that story.
Or that you took advantage of connections, because you didn't. This was all self-made. This wasn't that your father worked there or you were recommended or anything. And I think that's really important to mention, because this is possible.
Yes, it's possible, but it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes leveraging everything that I've always put a lot of hard work into to bring it all together and to understand and to shape that, like the relating part, and to do things that were uncomfortable, right? Like to go after things. I was like, I became the president of my graduate student association, so I can do public speaking and I could advocate and I can have a story to tell. And I didn't do that because I was like, oh, this is going to look good on my resume. I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm meant for.
Right.
And I did. I learned how to be a management consultant at the number 1 sort of firm in the world. And I didn't stay there very long. I was there only for like 3.5 years. I learned the trade of consulting, and I've been a self-employed consultant for over a decade because I understood the relationship and the product. The product was me, and I could go to market directly. And I did that. I did that full-time. Well, I don't know. I actually never worked full-time when I worked for myself. And so I've been scaling back ever since I started my self-employment journey to working very, very little for, working less and less, and really refocusing my time and my effort, my limited time on this earth towards other endeavors. And also family time. That's why I said, in some ways I'm very normal. Married, I have a husband and 2 children, and we live in a major city in the U.S. I think in some ways, from the outside, we have a very, very standard life for what the circles we revolve in.
So we're going to end here, but I know that we need to have a part 2 to this, because there's this whole other part that we need to discuss, and that is what looks normal on the outside is not necessarily normal on the inside as a way of living. And I'm going to hold that out as a teaser for everybody. But I think that it's really important to just note that everything that you did previously set you up to be able to do this right now moving forward.
Yes.
And to focus and actually practice your craft, as I'll call it, but whatever you're truly interested in or want to accomplish is something that's really important.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sounds good.
Okay. So
Stay
in the meantime, if people want to find out about you, where should they go?
So the best place to really get an insider look of what, and those live videos, all on money, by the way.
Right, because we didn't even talk about that.
Twitter.
We didn't even say what they were about.
Yes. Twitter, at Joanna Zarach, and you can put my handle in there. Find me on Twitter. Just scroll down. Look, I'm a little bit on Instagram if you want to buy Girl Scout cookies. My Girl Scout cookie mom, and but yeah, find me on Twitter, and that's where you can also message me, because I will get those messages and they will not get lost in the sort of shuffle of email.
Message you through Twitter, or message you through Twitter?
Twitter, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good.
Yeah.
All right, Joanna. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
You.
And
always a pleasure.
I know. I can't wait to do part 2. This is gonna be awesome.